All right, Shalom. I want to begin by giving all glory and praises to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Rachakwadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles, the great millstone. Shalom to the hopefully elect, and Shalom to all the Akim pushing this truth for sincerity. It's your brother Itazwan from the GMS Columbus branch coming back again with another video through the Spirit. Lord's will it be edifying. And real quick, Salakia. But pretty much today, I'm going to do another segment going into some history and timelines, okay? That we may get a broader understanding of what's going on in the scriptures, mingled in with dates and things that happened during that time in the ancient world. And pretty much I just wanted to tap into 2 Kings, the 24th chapter, okay? And understanding that ultimately the besieging of Jerusalem pretty much had 3 periods, all right, before it was completely destroyed, in the sense that, Nebuchadnezzar II at that time, all right, wiped us clean, so to speak. Okay, because at this time you had 3 kings of the line of Judah, okay, who were around. And, you had 3 different periods within those 3 kings that Jerusalem was besieged. Okay. Now we're just going to tap into it through the Spirit. And pretty much this chapter breaks that down, because when you dive into it, this is pretty much an abridged version of around, I want to say 605, from around 605 to around 586 BC, 587. Okay. So, understanding the dates and the times and, this is all stuff you can look up. There's a lot of this is in secular history as well. All right, concerning the records of the Babylonians, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, etc. Which the first ruler or the one who spearheaded, the Neo-Babylonian Empire was Nebuchadnezzar, okay, which was the father of Nebuchadnezzar written here, which this is, ultimately Nebuchadnezzar II, okay. All right, so let's just dive into it. This is 2 Kings 24. Let me see. I'm going to go NLT. It says, during Jehoiakim's reign, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon invaded the land of Judah. Jehoiakim surrounded and paid him tribute for 3 years, but then rebelled, right? So, and around this time, this is pretty much around, I believe, 605 BC. Okay, 606 BC, around this time. Okay, and Jehoiakim paid tribute to Nebuchadnezzar. All right, but he rebelled. Okay, and in his rebellion, this is what sparked the first besieging, all right, or the first invasion from Nebuchadnezzar II. Verses 2, it says, Then Yahweh sent bands of Babylonian, Armenian, Moabite, and Ammonite raiders against Judah to destroy it, just as Yahweh had promised through his prophets, right? And that's concerning what was written by Jeremiah in the 25th chapter and the 29th chapter. Let's jump to that. This is Jeremiah, the 29th chapter. Let's start at really could start at the top. Let's start at the top. This is Jeremiah 29 NLT. It says, Jeremiah wrote a letter from Jerusalem to elders, priests, prophets, and all the people who had been exiled to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. This was after King Jehoiakim the queen mother, the court officials, the other officials of Judah, and all the craftsmen and artisans had been deported from Jerusalem. He sent the letter with Elisha, son of Shaphan, and Gemariah, Slakia, son of Hilkiah, when they went to Babylon as King Zedekiah's ambassadors to Nebuchadnezzar. This is what Jeremiah's letter said. Right, so you had pretty much 3 mass deportations. The first, being during, Jehoiakim's reign, okay, which during that time, that's when you had the first batch, which contained Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael in it. And you read about that in Daniel, the first chapter. All right, Daniel 1 at the top, it says, in the 3rd year, KJV, of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And Yahweh gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of the Most High, which he carried into the land Shinar, to the house of his God, and brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. Right. It says, and the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom and cunning and knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. Right, so he grabbed the elite of the nation, the upper echelon of the nation, to help forward his palace, etc. And like I said, this first bundle happened around, as it says, this event occurred 605 BC during the 3rd year of Jehoiakim's reign, according to the calendar system, in which the new year begins in the spring. And that completely ties the 2 Kings, the 24th chapter, in those first few verses, going into Jehoiakim. Okay? And then, as we're going to read, Jehoiakim was captured and eventually perished. Okay, and then who was set up after him? Jehoiakim, his son, who reigned for a short time, and then ultimately was bound as well. Okay, so pretty much at this time, they were still kings in Israel, but they were pretty much ambassadors for Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, continuing on, 2 Kings 24 NLT, it says, these disasters happened to Judah because of Yahweh's command. He had decided to banish Judah from his presence because of many sins of Manasseh, who had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood. Yahweh would not forgive this. Right. At this time, when you go through Kings or even Chronicles, it pretty much gives you a bridge history concerning the unrighteous and righteous kings that were in the land, going through the northern tribe and, the southern tribes, etc. Okay. And you had a handful of righteous kings, and, majority were wicked. They were going off. And then for these reasons, as we got to the latter end of certain of those kings, the Lord, like I said, went to open up the mind of Jeremiah to behold the wickedness that was going on in the land. Okay. And prophesy against the people. Okay. And in that, he prophesied about them being captured by the Babylonians. But, on the flip side, the Lord, gave him a time span of 70 years. Okay. And in that, he pretty much prophesied as well about the revival of the nation too at that time. Okay. Which ultimately came through by Cyrus. All right. And you read about that with Ezra, Zerubbabel. Okay. And, a latter portion going into, Xerxes. You read about that concerning, Nehemiah being able to rebuild the walls, okay, etc. Because Nebuchadnezzar came through and wrecked shit, man. And then you had Esau, around about helping, chanting them. You read about that in Psalms 137. All right, this is what was going on at that time. But continuing on, verses 5, it says, the rest of the events of Jehoiakim's reign and all his deeds are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. When Jehoiakim died, his son Jehoiakim became the next king. You see? So, like I said, Jehoiakim ultimately died. Okay? Forget the exact date. I wanna say maybe it was 597-ish. Or, somewhere around there. All right. As a matter of fact, I could look it up. Let's look it up. Jehoiakim. Should just get that. Yep, 598. Because, and then you had Jehoiakim, who was set up after him, and then that's when the second sacking of the temple or the land, or the second besieging of the land happened, right, in 597 BC. Okay. And right, it says Jehoiakim, also sometimes spelled Jehoiakim, was the 18th, and Antipen Nemo, I don't know how to pronounce that. Antipen ultimate king of Judah from 609 to 598 BC, right? And it said in his third year, which was around 606, 605 BC, is when Nebuchadnezzar came. Okay. It reads, Jehoiakim died. His son Jehoiakim became the next king. The king of Egypt did not venture out of his country after that, for the king of Babylon captured the entire area formerly claimed by Egypt from the brook. It's like you just getting up. From the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates River. Jehoiakim was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. His mother was Nehushta, the daughter of El-Nathan from Jerusalem. Jehoiakim did what was evil in Yahweh's sight, just as his father had done, right? So this is roughly around 597 BC. Okay, Jehoiakim reigned in his father's stead and was the new ambassador for Nebuchadnezzar, who pretty much, had dominion over Jerusalem at that time, and he did that was evil in the sight of the Yahweh Bahasham Yahushua as well. Verses 10 says, during Jehoiakim's reign, the officers of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came up against Jerusalem and besieged it, right? So this is 597 BC, because, I made mention, and, we was doing a quick deal on Daniel, the first chapter, and pretty much was just tapping into it. And this is what sparked these lessons, ultimately, just making sure Jake getting the dates correct and going into it in depth. So, we got further understanding of, the history concerning the Babylonian captivity and what was taking place, the dates, times, and, the land, the maps, etc. Just want to make sure, because, I was going into it through the spirit, kind of just went off the dome, But I want to, go back, reread it, tap back into it, so that everything is completely edifying. So Lord's will, Jake, receives this, and we get further understanding, and it helps when you go into these men, the history, man. You got the apostles always go into. You got to know the history to understand the mystery, man. Verse 11, it says, Nebuchadnezzar himself arrived at the city during the besieging. Then Jehoiakim, along with the queen mother, his adversars, his commanders, and his office officials, surrendered to the Babylonians. In the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, he took Jehoiakim prisoner. Right? See, and what? When did Nebuchadnezzar become king? 605 BC. Once his father's death, after his father's death. So you, like I said, you do the math. What, 605 to 597 BC. All right, that's 8 years. See, and this is, like I said, right when Jehoiakim came, and he reigned for a short stay, and Nebuchadnezzar came a second time in 597. So that's the second invasion on the land. And real quick, I just want to check myself on something. I think I made a... Yeah, kind of. I want to make sure, because I believe Jehoiakim was bound by Nebuchadnezzar as well. Yep. He died. Yep. And I believe he died in Babylon. Yep. I just want to check, make sure. But going back, where we at? Matter of fact, let me hide all the thing I read so far. Verses 13, it says, as Yahweh has said beforehand, Nebuchadnezzar carried away all the treasures from Yahweh's temple and the royal palace. He stripped away all the gold objects that King Solomon of Israel had placed in the temple. King Nebuchadnezzar took all of Jerusalem captive, including all the commanders, the best of soldiers, craftsmen, and artisans, 10,000 in all. Only the poorest people were left in the land, right? And those were the people that was Zerubbabel had to deal with. And pretty much, is it in this chapter? Had to deal with when we got the decree to go back. All right. This is Zerubbabel, right? Concerning the rebuilding of the temple, etc. Matter of fact, yep. Real quick, Ezra 2 at the top. It says, now these are the children of the province that went up out of the captivity, right? Because you read that verse prior in Ezra first chapter. Start at 11. It says, all the vessels of gold and of silver were 5,500. All these did Sheshbazzar bring up with them of the captivity that were brought up from Babylon unto Jerusalem. Okay, and I ain't the footnotes to give you some of the dates. It's already, see, that's 70 years. It says, verse 1, Ezra 2, now these are the children of the province that went up out of the captivity of those which had been carried away, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away unto Babylon, and came again unto Jerusalem. See, they came again unto Jerusalem, and Judah every one unto his city, which came with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Realiah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mizpar, Bigvah, Rehum, Benanah, the number of men of people of Israel, the children of Parash 2,000 and 172, the children of Shiftiah 372, right down the line. This goes into those who pretty much went back to the land. And, like I said, at that time, all you had in the land were the poorest of the land. All right. Because Nebuchadnezzar took all the officials, those who, like I said, were the upper echelon of Jerusalem at that time, or of the southern tribes, and, like I said, during this time, this is when the Lord put the spirit on Zerubbabel to rebuild. Okay. Let me see. Yeah, all this is good history, man. Let me see. Yeah, this is a short chapter. I might read it. Let me read Ezra 3 real quick. Let's go NLT. It says, in early autumn, when the Israelites had settled in their towns, all the people assembled in Jerusalem with a unified purpose. Then Jeshua, son of Jehozadak, joined his fellow priests and Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, with his family in rebuilding the altar of the Most High of Israel. It wanted to sacrifice burnt offerings on it as instructed in the law of Moses, the man of the Most High. Even though the people were afraid of the local residents, they rebuilt the altar at its old site. Then they began to sacrifice burnt offerings on the altar to Yahweh each morning and evening. They celebrated the festival of shelters, right, the Feast of Tabernacles, as prescribed in the law, sacrificing the number of burnt offerings specified for each day of the festival. They also offered a regular burnt offering and the offerings required for the new moon celebrations and the annual festival as prescribed by Yahweh. The people also gave voluntary offerings to Yahweh. 15 days before the festival shelters began, the priests had begun to sacrifice burnt offerings to Yahweh. This was even before they had started to lay the foundation of Yahweh's temple. Then the people hired masons and carpenters and bought cedar logs from the people of Tyre and Sidon, paying them with food, wine, and olive oil. The logs were brought down from Lebanon mountains and floated along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea to Joppa, for King Cyrus had given permission for this. See, the construction of the temple of the Most High began in mid-spring during the second year after they arrived in Jerusalem. So I'm guessing we're like 536, yep, con. Their workforce was made up of everyone who had returned from exile, including Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, Jeshua, son of Jehozadak, and his fellow priests, and all the Levites. The Levites who were 20 years old or older were put in charge of rebuilding Yahweh's temple. The workers at the temple of the Most High were supervised by Jeshua and his sons and relatives, Kadmiel and his sons, all descendants of Hodaviah. They were helped in his task by the Levites of the family of Henadad. When the builders completed the foundation of Yahweh's temple, the priests put on their robes and took their places to blow their trumpets, and the Levites, descendants of Asaph, clashed with their cymbals the praise of Yahweh, just as King David had prescribed. With praise and thanks, they sang this song to Yahweh. He is so good. His faithful love for Israel endures forever. Even all the people gave a great shout, praising Yahweh because the foundation of Yahweh's temple had been laid. But many of the older priests, Levites, and other leaders who had seen the first temple wept aloud when they saw the new temple's foundation. The others, however, were shouting for joy. The joyful shouting and weeping mingled together in a loud noise that could be heard far in the distance, right? So this all ties into that history. This is what was prophesied ultimately after the completion of the 70 years. Let's jump back to Jeremiah, the 29th chapter. And verses 10, it says, NSC, it says, this is what Yahweh says, you will be in Babylon for 70 years, but then I will come and do for you all the good things I have promised, and I will bring you home again. You see, and that was a part of it that fulfilled that 70 years. Okay. Verse 11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, says Yahweh, they are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. In those days when you pray, I will listen. If you look for me wholeheartedly, you will find me. I will be found by you, says Yahweh. I will end your captivity and restore your fortunes. I will gather you out of the nations where I sent you. I will bring you home again to your own land, right? And linking this up with today, this is what's going to happen. This same formula, as we are in this new Babylon the Great, will happen once more. The Heavenly Father is going to take us out of the lands He sent us and bring us back to our land as He has done before. Because ultimately going, into, Cyrus, Medo-Persian Empire, etc., we were still bound and by those nations as well, because we weren't in our sovereignty, we still had our land, etc., but we weren't sovereign. We weren't the top nation during those times. We still had to take orders and get decrees from those who are ruling over us. Okay. And then, after that, going into the Greek Empire, things got real bad. All right. Dealing with Antiochus, etc. Okay. Now let's jump back to, we out on time. Let's jump back to 2 Kings 24 and continue to read on. So we're going to tap into Zedekiah as well. We at, I think we were at this. Read this. All right. Verse 15, it says, Nebuchadnezzar led King Jehoiakim away as a captive to Babylon, along with his mother and his wives and his officials. Damn, that's weird. That's a good chapter or a good scripture going to multiple wives. And all Jerusalem's elite, you see. He also exiled 7,000 of the best troops and 1,000 craftsmen and artisans, all of whom were strong and fit for war. It says the king of Babylon installed Mattaniah, which is Zedekiah, Jehoiakim's uncle, as the next king, and he changed Mattaniah's name to Zedekiah. See? Highlight this. Start a new highlight. It says, then the king of Babylon installed Mattaniah, Jehoiakim's uncle, as the next king, right? So pretty much he set up himself an ambassador, someone to report to. All right, liaison, you see? Because like I said, they were in subjection. It says he changed Mattaniah's name to Zedekiah. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah from Libnah, but Zedekiah did what was evil in Yahweh's sight, just as Jehoiakim had done. These things happened because of Yahweh's anger against the people of Jerusalem and Judah until he finally banished them from his presence and sent them into exile. Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Continuing on, chapter 25, verse 1, it says, so on January 15th, during the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon led his entire army against Jerusalem. They surrounded the city and built siege ramps against the walls, right? And, pretty much this is what, around 587, I believe, or 588, 588, 587. And I believe in 586 is when it was completely taken over, man, by Nebuchadnezzar. Because what? Zedekiah tried to rebel and it didn't work in his favor. And ultimately Nebuchadnezzar just came and this is where you get pretty much, when he just came down, with the hammer completely, man. Verses 2 NLT, it says Jerusalem was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah's reign. By July 18th and the 11th year of Zedekiah's reign, right? Because like I said, you do the time. When did Jehoiakim get out of power? And what, 597? And this is what, around 588. See? 586, 588 to 586. All this was happening. All right. Hebrew, by the 9th day of the 4th month in the 11th year of Zedekiah's reign, compared to Jeremiah 52:6. And the note there, this day was July 18th, 586 BC. Also see note on 25:1. It says, highlight all this. It says Jerusalem was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah's reign. By July 18th, in the 11th year of Zedekiah's reign, the famine in the city had become very severe, and the last of the food was entirely gone. Then a section of the city wall was broken down. See, they had broke down the wall. Okay, and what that led to what? Nehemiah rebuilding the walls. By the Babylonians, they waited for nightfall. Then they slipped through the gate between the two walls behind the king's garden and headed toward the Jordan Valley. But the Babylonian troops chased the king, caught him in the plains of Jericho, for his men had all deserted him and scattered. They took him to the king of Babylon and Riblah, where they pronounced judgment upon Zedekiah. They made Zedekiah watch as they slaughtered his sons. Then they gouged out Zedekiah's eyes, bound him in bronze chains, and led him away to Babylon. On August 14th of that year, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, King Nebuchadnezzar II, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard and an official of the Babylonian king, arrived in Jerusalem. He burnt down the temple of Yahweh, right? So this was when they burnt it down, the temple completely. First, they just took, the vessels out of it, and then they burnt it down. Okay. See, and like I said, at this time, I believe this is what connects to Psalms 137. And Esau was round about at this time. Let's see. We'll get some footnotes. They don't give us none, but we know this ties, completely with this during this time. Psalms 1, this is when, things were getting destroyed. First, things were getting sacked and taken. It was taking servants and vessels from the temple. Then they start to destroy the city. It says, Psalms 137 at the top, it says, beside the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept as we thought of Jerusalem. We put away our harps, hanging them on the branches of poplar trees. For our captors demanded a song from us. Our tormentors insisted on a joyful hymn. Sing us one of those songs of Jerusalem. But how can we sing the songs of Yahweh while in paying land, strange lands, pagan lands, Salakia? It says, if I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget how to play the harp. May my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth if I fail to remember you. And it says, if I don't make Jerusalem my greatest joy. Oh yeah, I remember what the Edomites did on the day the armies of Babylon captured Jerusalem, destroyed it. They yelled, level it to the ground. O Babylon, you will be destroyed. Happy is one who pays you back for what you have done to us. Happy is the one who takes your babies and smashes them against the rocks. And that's going to be the recompense for us, man. All right. Where we at? 2 Kings 25. Let's keep reading. It says, but the Babylonian troops chased the king and caught him on the plains of Jericho, for his men had all deserted him and scattered. They took him to the king of Babylon at Riblah, where they pronounced judgment upon Zedekiah. They made Zedekiah watch as they slaughtered his sons. Then they gouged out Zedekiah's eyes, bound him in bronze chains, and led him away to Babylon. On August 14th of that year, which was the 19th year of the king Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard and an official of the Babylonian king, arrived in Jerusalem. He burned down the temple of Yahweh, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. He destroyed all the important buildings in the city. Then he supervised the entire Babylonian army as they tore down the walls of Jerusalem on every side. See, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, then took as the exiles the rest of the people who remained in the city, the defectors who had declared their allegiance to the king of Babylon, and the rest of the population. They say, then took, Khan. So they bowed down. But the captain of the guard allowed some of the poorest people to stay behind in Judah, you see, to care for the vineyards and fields. The Babylonians broke up the bronze pillars in front of Yahweh's temple, the bronze water carts, and the great bronze basins called the sea, and they carried all the bronze away to Babylon. They also took all the ash buckets, shovels, lamps, snuffers, dishes, and all the other bronze articles used for making sacrifices at the temple. Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, also took the incense burners and basins and all the other articles made of pure gold or silver. They weighed the weight of the bronze from the two pillars, the sea, and the water carts. Salaki, forgive me. It says, these things had been made for Yahweh's temple in the days of King Solomon. Let me highlight all this. It says, the weight of the bronze from the two pillars, the sea, and the water carts was too great to be measured. These things had been made for the Yahweh's temple in the days of Solomon. Each of the pillars was 27 feet tall. The bronze capital on top of each pillar was 7.5 feet tall high and was decorated with network of bronze pomegranates in all the way. Right, and, pretty much, you see, and, it just goes further into the history, the things they took, etc. Let's jump down to 20. jump down to 21. It says, there at Riblah, in the land of Hamath, the king of Babylon had them all. Just gotta keep reading, man. Let's go to 18. It says, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took with him as prisoners Sariah, the high priest, Zephaniah, the priest of the second rank, and the 3 chief gatekeepers. And from among the people still hiding in the city, he took an officer who had been in charge of Judean army, five of the king's personal advisors, the army commander's chief secretary, who was in charge of recruitment, and 60 other citizens. Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took them all to the king of Babylon and Riblah. Yeah, this is all crazy. This is what happened. It says, and there at Riblah, the land of Hamath, the king of Babylon had them all put to death. So the people of Judah were sent into exile from their land. Then King Nebuchadnezzar appointed Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, and grandson of Shaphan, as governor over the people he had left in Judah. When all the army commanders and their men learned that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah Salakia as governor, they went to see him at Mizpah. These included Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, Jehonan, son of Kariah, Sariah, son of Tenhamath, the Netophathite, and Jezaniah, son of the Ma'akathite, and all their men. It says, Gedaliah vowed to them that the Babylonian officers meant them no harm. Don't be afraid of them. Live in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and all will go well for you. He promised. All right, that's pretty much it, man. You can continue to read. Let me see. Jump down to 27. It says, in the 37th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim of Judah, evil Merodach as ascended to Babylonian throne. He was kind to Jehoiakim and released him from prison on April 2nd of that year. Yeah, so he served a long stint. See, he spoke kindly to Jehoiakim and gave him a higher place than all the other exiled kings in Babylon. He supplied Jehoiakim with new clothes to replace his prison garb and allow him to dine in the king's presence for the rest of his life. So the Babylonian king gave him a regular food allowance as long as he lived, right? Because at this point, what did it say? In the 37th year of the exile of Jehoiakim, right? So he served 37 years. Get a footnote, see when this was. Salakia. Right, 561. See? And what it started, when he go down, 597? See, so right, roughly 37 years he was in prison. All right, so that's pretty much it, man. Like I said, just focusing on some history and the timelines. All right, like I said, you had pretty much 2 primary invasions, and then the third one was, the finale, so to speak, which, they just went all out. They just started to tear down the walls, tear down, places of stature, important places, homes, etc. And what 586 is pretty much 587, 586 is pretty much when Jerusalem was completely destroyed and through. Prior to the two invasions where, like I said, they just, focused on taking vessels and, capturing, certain higher ups in the land at that time. All right, so you had three periods: 605 BC, the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. All right, and during the time of Jehoiakim and his third year, you had 597. Okay, once Jehoiakim died. All right, and Jehoiakim, his son, reigned in his stead. All right, and reigned for a short time. You had the second invasion where he did, like I said again, took vessels from the temple and men. And then the third around 586, in its totality, from 588 to 586, when Zedekiah, the ambassador he set up and the king he set up over the nation, in his 11th year, after, like I said, in his 11th year, in his 11th year, after his rebellion, all right, he went all out and, took down the nation completely. And, we were, pretty much desolate at that point. All right. So Lord's Word is edifying to those who may receive it. A little lengthy, but, it's vital that we dive into these things and, we're able to get understanding of what was going on, different mandates and times, and the significance of these situations, man. Because they got to pay. They paid in a sense, through Cyrus, but they got to feel the wrath of the Heavenly Father. All right, we say he's not going to acquit the wicked. All right, we say real quick, let's get a precept, Jeremiah 10. Jeremiah 10:25. And let's go NLT. It says, pour out your wrath on the nations that refuse to acknowledge you, on the peoples that do not call upon your name. For they have devoured your people, Israel. They have devoured and consumed them, making the land a desolate wilderness, right? And that happened in a few accounts, okay? So with that, we'll give all glory and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rekakwadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles, a great millstone. Shalom to the hopefully elect. And shalom to all the Akim pushing this truth for sincerity. Say shalom, Baba.